It's live on YouTube now.
I know. Good evening. My name is John. I'm with Broadsheet, and you're very welcome to Tomorrow Tonight. We're very honoured to be joined by Derek Mooney, Public Affairs Consultant and Broadsheet columnist. Good evening, Derek.
Hello, John. How are you going?
Very well, very well. Forgive the lateness tonight. We had some connectivity problems anyway. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, no problem at all. We can hear you perfectly.
Great. Derek has a column on today's site, on the site today, and it's about the disconnect between the Defence Forces and the Department of Defence. We'll go to that after we go straight to papers. Okay.
No problem at all, yep.
Yep. Brilliant. Just go 1 second. Are you well, Derek?
I have no reason to complain.
Oh, okay. How's your mum?
Yeah, not too bad at all. Not too bad. Actually, strange enough, we were hoping that she'd have a date for her vaccination, and she doesn't yet. They're saying it's upcoming, but they just can't put a date on it specifically. But we're hoping in the next 2 to 3 weeks, the latest. Because the Spanish rollout seems to be doing okay, but just in her region, they haven't got around to. I think they've done the over 85s. She's in the over 80 category, so we would have expected it by now. Anyway, there we go.
Okay, and if she was in Ireland, it would be mid-April, mid-May?
No, in Ireland, they probably around the same time now, in fairness, because I think they're doing the 85s this week. And about 100,000, that should do that, and then probably. So I think it would have been roughly the same around the same week or two. It just appears to be in her region that they've kind of gone a slightly different way about it, but say that way.
Okay, Irish Examiner, severe limits to stay in place for months. Reopening schools and childcare, key parts of a revised COVID plan.
Yeah. That's it. I mean, this is what they're expecting from tomorrow's cabinet meeting. So around maybe about 6 o'clock or so that the government will announce its new living with COVID strategy and what they expect to happen over March, April, May.
It's a little bit more optimistic in the UK.
It's a lot more optimistic in the UK because the UK, certainly parts of the UK, are at 30% of the adult population have been so far vaccinated. Now, okay, it's only one vaccine, it's only the first shot. But as by all the reports, be it Pfizer or AstraZeneca, that gives you a good level of protection against COVID for several months. So it looks like that they're much, and that's going to be the compare and contrast between Ireland and the UK, particularly between Ireland and Northern Ireland. Is that we're watching people coming out of lockdown and watching kind of things opening up in Northern Ireland. So, like, you're going to see Derry at one speed and Letterkenny, Liver and Strabane, which are literally just separated by one bridge across the border. I mean, it's going to be a big. The contrast is going to be very clear.
Yeah,
but it's not the only contrast.
Yeah, and that's nonsense, isn't it?
It is the difficulty with it, etc. Which is, I know that the government. I mean, I was kind of just trying to do a paper and kind of I was going to say back of a fag baggers, but just not politically correct in any sense of the word. But I was trying to do a calculation, and if by the end of March we've administered about 1 million vaccines here, that's about 500,000 people vaccinated. And then the government says, I think Stephen Donnelly or somebody else had said that they're expecting 1 million vaccines per month from April onwards. Well, allowing that most of those are 2 shots, there's about 4 million adults. It's 8 million shots of vaccine. We'll say 7 million allowing for Johnson & Johnson being a single dose. Well, then it's going to take, if you have only 1 million vaccinations delivered by the end of March, and you're getting 1 million from April onwards, and you still need 6 million more, that puts you into September. But that's to deliver the second shot. That means August. In Denmark, their target date to have everyone vaccinated, all adults, the vast majority of the population, is 29th of June. The UK, it's not so. It's by the time they pay critical mass will probably be sometime in May, and they're hoping to have everyone vaccinated and be well into the second round of vaccinations by June. So we're going to have to step up the program here, even with there has been a big step up this week, 80,000, next week 100,000. We presume 100,000 every week in March, and 1 million. That means 250,000 vaccines through April, May, June. That's still going to have to be stepped up. And if Denmark can vaccinate everyone by the 29th of June, there is absolutely no reason why we can't.
and but it doesn't look likely. And
it doesn't, and it's
who's to blame for that, Derek? Then
I don't know. I mean, look, there's a certain amount of this attaches to the European community in terms of supply, but if Denmark can is part of the same European Union, the same rules as we are, well, then you have to say that the rest of the difference, which is that kind of 2 to 3 months difference, that has to lie here somewhere. Now, whether it's with the HSE, with the department, with the government, they can argue about where the fallout is between them, but it's somewhere in there, somewhere right in the middle.
Okay.
And it's the absence of hope. I mean, it's just I'm not going to kind of hammer the point home any more than it's been done over the weekend, which is but the government communications have truly been atrocious on this. The last week's kind of added kind of this incidental dropping it in. Oh, by the way, there'll be another 9 weeks of maybe not level 5, but something severe, and I'm not too sure what it is. That was just crazy. And it was it was a really good interview that you got. I can't get this carefully. I can't think my name's going to made in the Daily Mirror last Thursday, Friday. And when she showed the video clip, I mean, she really did catch the Taoiseach on the hop, and he didn't go on there with something very specific to say. It was all a bit incidental. And that's just we cannot be doing this. We cannot this far into this problem.
You pinpointed another case of that with Neil Martin a couple of weeks ago, didn't you, regarding
the Brendan O'Connor thing, which is when he went on and I found a kind of a nice little reference point to it. I just listened to an interview or listened to some BBC archive thing the other day, and they were talking about John Friedman. John Friedman, I think, was John Freeman, used to do the not in the psychiatrist's chair, whatever the precursor for that one was, face to face.
Oh yes, yeah.
Back in the 50s and 60s, the famous one with Tony Hancock, where Freeman would have his back to the camera, so you never saw Freeman on screen.
Yes.
And he should think, but what Freeman's great thing was that he would ask you a question, and you would answer the question, and then Freeman left a pause. And people instinctively feel the need to fill that pause, and that's what I thought Brendan O'Connor did I won't say brilliantly. And maybe I'm projecting here. Maybe he didn't do that, but certainly I thought of 1 or 2 points that Brendan was very measured and didn't say anything, and let Micheál come forward and then say something that was not wrong or anything like that, but just to go a little bit further than he'd originally planned.
Just to fill the dead air.
To fill the air, yeah.
Yeah, it's certainly
a great strategy. They said it was also what David Frost used to do on his Sunday morning interview, which was that he could actually be far more deadly by being slightly calm rather than just hectoring and answer the question.
Yeah, I mean, Frost was always nice to his guests, wasn't he, no matter what.
But always got a story. I mean, Frost, you could rest assured that Frost would something that had been said on Frost's programme on Sunday was going to be in the papers on Monday.
Yeah, I saw Paxman interviewing Jonathan Sumption, and it's so reductive, that kind of, even Vincent, I mean, it was hugely entertaining, but where did it get us, really, No,
that's it. It worked as a piece of entertainment, but in terms of actually getting the story out and again, which was Frost was meticulous. Frost had a deep understanding of it. He had a ton of people doing his research for him, and then fairness, like he put in. But he knew, but he had an eye to a story himself, and he could see the points, and he also understood the medium.
Yeah. I suppose by the end he was one of them, more than one of them.
Oh, he was very much. I mean, he was very much part of the establishment.
The Irish Sun, a completely different story about John McAreevy. This poor guy and etc. and this the family, but it is again, which is it brings us back down to looking at that so how do you get over trauma like that, and particularly something that is played out so much in the public eye, that was so kind of commented upon. It's a very, very difficult thing, but an extraordinary family, and to her family as well. He's now managing. I'm not a GAA guy, but he's now managing.
No, and I'm struggling myself. I know it was Tyrone, but I can't.
Okay, but he's now with like a team in the south, I think.
And I just can't. If I could be bothered to find the phone, I'd Google it, but I'd pretend I knew, but I don't.
Well, our commentator Shayna is from Tyrone. Maybe she can. She can tell us. Cork's still on flood alert.
There's an extraordinary thing that, I mean, every 2 years we see things like that, particularly of that part of the Lee up further in the Western, which is up past UCC, etc. That we had. I mean, I can't think there's a river. I can't think the hotel that was badly flooded there about 2 or 3 years ago. But it seems to be just How many times you go through this? I mean, just say what's a staff at Cork County Hall putting out the tarpaulins and the rest of it. So that's that bit up the Lee Road, up the Western Road. Yes.
No, isn't it? I must ask Jan on Thursday.
Absolutely, yeah. I asked him to go down to us. I think you should, yeah. Take me down there with a teaspoon and explain to people why this is global warming.
Yeah, this is it. Bernard Purcell's The Irish World. Bernard Purcell is the editor.
Yeah, again, they have this interesting thing there, which is they kind of side by side of what's happening in Ireland and what's happening in the UK. And when you go to the UK papers and the rest of it, you'll see they have a very, I mean, it's extraordinary the turnaround for Boris Johnson, which is like 6 months ago, he was having a very bad crisis. At the moment, particularly there's the speedy rollout of the vaccines, and there is nobody can take away from just how superb the vaccine rollout has been in the UK. Not merely the speed of it, the organisation of it, the comprehensive nature of it. I just happened to friends of friends. Their mother got stranded in the UK. She'd gone over to visit kids before Christmas, and she got stranded there. She's now been vaccinated, so when she comes home to Ireland, she'll arrive home vaccinated. I mean, and actually, she was vaccinated about 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Is it as a Remainer, Derek? Does it sort of demolish some of your arguments?
No, I don't particularly think so. No, AstraZeneca, I think there's some certain problems there because it's now emerged that the contracts were not signed that far between them. That the UK contract and the EU contract were not that far, so it wasn't as if the UK was kind of well in there beforehand. It is about the amount of stuff that's been produced in the UK. And by the way, the UK wouldn't have had half these industries there if it wasn't part of the EU originally, etc. In terms of because it was an easy for pharma sector an easy way into the EU.
Okay.
But I think what it is, it's about planning. It's about deciding that just how much effort you're going to put into it. It is certainly about supply, and there's no question about it. So, I mean, there is an argument on that one, but it's also, not overwhelmingly on that. But it's also making it. The big decision the UK made was that, notwithstanding the gap between first and second doses, that they were going to get everyone vaccinated as soon as humanly possible.
Right.
Now, they could have done that within the European protocols as well. There was nothing to stop them doing that. So it's not down entirely to Brexit, but there is the harsh part. There is part of it, but not entirely.
Okay. So this safety first, but hope it lasts. Also, virtual St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
Again, another one. And are you a rugby man, Derek?
No.
Okay. London Ireland Irish had a stunning 25-point comeback against Bristol. Okay. The Daily Telegraph, 118 days until freedom.
This is again, which is, if you look at if you actually scroll back up again, but I think it's actually in the front of a couple of the papers, which is these dates, and they've now said out. And I think the UK government has been very clear that, look, this is based on data, not on dates. This is not based just purely in terms of, like, well, on such a date we're opening up, that the way they've modelled it is that they expect comfortably to see certain things done at certain dates. But it's now setting a clear route out of this, and I think that's I think Johnson today in the House of Commons described it as a one-way route out, as in this is going to get there.
So
it gives hope, and it's not a false hope and the rest of it. I think it gives a real hope, and it's incremental, it's measured, and again, it's parallel with greater rollout of the vaccine and hitting certain critical points. And it is about their vaccine rollout program. It's what it's based on.
Okay, so why couldn't the EU have? Is Ursula's having a very bad pandemic, isn't she?
She's having a very bad pandemic, and the EU have handled this badly. Now, there is an argument about how they've handled this with AstraZeneca. In terms of Pfizer's program kind of did slow down, but that speeds up considerably. Look, I mean, I've no doubt that once we get into March and when we get into April, that the vaccine rollout will considerably accelerate across Europe. And at a certain point across Europe, we will be. Because, like, the reason why this isn't just entirely down to Europe, we can see that here, is because how can Denmark have gotten that far ahead of us? Denmark had vaccinated all the people in its care homes by the 8th of January.
Right.
8th of January.
Okay.
And they're operating under the same supply lines, the same protocols as we are.
Okay, well,
because they're banging the table and they were saying, listen, guys, you give us the vaccine, we'll have it into arms straight away. And we were far too slow to start.
Okay, he's definitely got lockdown hair, Boris.
And that's a really bad photograph of him.
Well,
There's something gaunt or something grey or something kind of thin-skinned about him. Like the far better one than the House of Commons there.
Yeah.
But again, which is it's sometimes it's not how you start, how you finish. Which is having had a very, very bad initial stages, having handled previous lockdowns extremely badly. This is now that you just see in terms of the vaccination program, it's showing.
And it's irreversible, as he says.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, I saw that the headline that I hadn't got that was on one. I think it's the Independent there, which is the one way road out.
Yeah, because that's something that Micheál Martin can't promise anything on that level.
Well, the promise is that. Now, by the way, this is not all down to Micheál Martin, because the problem. I mean, what you're having with the UK is that Boris Johnson speaks. You don't have 3 or 4 ministers coming out and second guessing him and then coming back and then talking it back or walking it back.
There's not a failure of leadership of Martin. There's not a failure of leadership of Martin's just to keep these guys dumb, or do they have their separate kind of?
Well, I would have argued that this has been a fundamental flaw in the government before it started, which is, I mean, one of the reasons I opposed the programme for government. I said, listen, Fine Gael, I never bought into this. You now have a Taoiseach who is, Micheál Martin is a Taoiseach between Leo Varadkar and Leo Varadkar. He was, and Varadkar is operating as like Bonnie Prince Charlie, a prince abroad. He's a prince abroad, but he's only down the end of the corridor, and he has an entire media operation at his disposal. He has
amazing,
and the fundamental flaws. I fundamentally believe that the rotation Taoiseach model doesn't work. It's not that it can't work; it's not going to work.
No,
and we're seeing this day after day.
Because he's not rotating. Varadkar's not taking a back seat, and it's like Gordon Brown and Blair. It's just
I think the fundamental flaws for him, that's exactly it. Which is, and Varadkar's now kind of like Adler's just counting down the days. At least they should.
It's amazing.
And so are civil servants, not because they want to see the back of Micheál Martin, but they're kind of saying, yeah, that's grand, but in a little over 18 months' time, or a bit more, 20-something months' time, we'll be answering to this fella. So we're not going to tell him to shut up now, because he's going to be our boss in less than 2 years. So there is a flaw, a fundamental flaw, in a fault line in this government. And Micheál is so determined to be conciliatory and hold together.
Well,
that is now that he's excusing too much.
I agree with you, perhaps, but I would say against the Varadkar kind of project, his character at the moment. It's quite a good strategy, because Varadkar seems to be, I don't know, just like improvising.
Oh yes, I mean again, which is. Look, I mean, I have argued from the long. I think Varadkar was an awful Taoiseach. I don't think he's a particularly good leader for Fine Gael. He had an exceptionally bad election last year, and we seem to be forgetting that. And by the way, I mean, I don't go into the poll numbers too often. I don't argue an awful lot in previous articles, but I think the Fine Gael number is way too high. I think there's an awful lot of soft votes in there, and I think there's a lot of people in Fine Gael know that. And I think you're now seeing a little bit more internal criticism of Varadkar than you did here a couple of weeks. Like there was huge after the election last year. And then what you had is then you had suddenly that from Patrick's Day onwards, and from that statement outside Blair House in Washington, Varadkar could do no wrong. And he had about 3 to 4 solid months when he was doing well. Himself and Harris were doing extraordinarily well. But everyone talking out of their sides of the mouths, the constant briefing against each other, the sniping, etc. It's just, you just can't get out. Now, none of this is made easier by the fact that people are not always in the same building in terms of the normal operation of government. It's happening remotely, it is happening at a distance, and key civil servants are a distance away.
How does Varadkar get on with Martin? Are they?
As far as I can make out, it's civil enough, and I think both of them are kind of calm and the rest of it. But Varadkar is, I think, probably a colder politician than Micheál is.
Yeah, of course he is. Yeah, but I mean, still, but Martin is quite bloodless, isn't he? He seems kind of.
But I think he's also hardwired to be slightly more cautious. He's not a man given for the big gesture or for the big bold move.
No.
And he takes too much into himself.
Yeah, he needs to seize the day on the mother and baby home. Do you think, Derek? Do you feel that's a very big election issue?
Look, I think it is, and it's just again, which is it's a problem that was formed long before, and the people arrived in there. And I said last week, and I stand by, which I do have some sympathy for Roderick O'Gorman on this. but that will come to an end because it's now his problem. He inherited a really, really bad situation, and
we spoke about this before, Derek. Was there some sort of quid pro quo to the Green? I mean, is it just cycle lanes, or is there something else they've been promised? Because he really they're going to take such a hit on this, you know.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think at the end of the day, they got the departments they asked for. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind. I mean, they wasn't kind of, listen, you take this really problem one, and we'll give you something on the other side. They got what they wanted for, etc. And
yeah, but why do they want those particular? I mean,
that I truthfully don't know. I truthfully why particular children. I think that I as far as I know, Roger Government does have to think about how they want to deal with a whole range of issues, and possibly in terms of their provision centres, etc. There's a whole thing. But look, again, I've never looked into the detail, etc.
No, it's completely mystifying, because you would have thought they would have taken on that ministerial position just to actually deal with the mother and baby homes, but it seems as though
the problem is, I think I think they could well have, but the problem is they've realised when they get in there, this is already set on the rails. The rails had been predetermined, pre-laid, and this is only going one way. And look, the minister started out being wrong-footed at the beginning over the data protection stuff, which was just, none of them seemed to understand that general data protection regulation, and there's large question marks about that legal note they had and just how inane it was.
Yeah.
And I just think from that point onwards, and problems these situations when you're on the back foot, suddenly that's what you're playing for the whole way through. And I think that was the unfortunate thing with it.
Yeah, but
I think they probably did think they could sort it out. I think they did think they could grab onto it, but clearly not.
Yeah, I have a horrible feeling that they didn't think there'd be as much pushback, because there, you know, these things last about a week. But suddenly with this, I felt that it has much more.
It had much more, but the problem is, again, which is, it started out badly. The government is well used to knowing how to deal with these commissions. I mean, that has a long experience of this, at getting them right and getting them wrong. So therefore, you would have thought the template was there. But suddenly this one, the template it went bad from data protection and thereafter. And it is always difficult when you have a number of victims groups who are all basically on the same page, but maybe have different priorities between them and have different constituencies within them.
Yeah.
And I just think there was a big difficulty, and there seemed to be almost a belief that, look, people will realise that we're in this for the right reason, and therefore will give us a break because we only just took this over now. And people are saying, yeah, that's grand, but you know what? We've been living with this for 30 years. Don't ask for any more patience from us. It's exhausted.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a moment for the Greens to take a principled stand, actually, with Fianna Fáil, you know, and I'm Fine Gael, and in terms of that coalition, you know, they can just sort of say, look, we're drawing a line under this kind of behaviour.
I'm not too sure to agree with you. I mean, look, it's what it is. Clearly the minister was extremely annoyed with the leaking of the report, and that's, I mean, again, but even the presentation of the report, even the manner in which it was given to people, given the weight and the volume of it, and expecting people to wade through this in a short space of time, that is now. And the no doubt the circumstances made this much worse. Then you have this absolute quagmire over who were at the interviews. Yeah. There's just so many.
And then they found.
I don't think there's bad faith on anyone's part in this. But the problem is, how do you say to people who've been mistreated for most of their adult lives, and have been they've been mistreated during their young lives and have spent their adult lives coping with that? How can you turn around and say to them, listen, will you just trust us a little bit more? I just think that's a possible ask.
Yeah, it's too much. I mean, moving on, the Financial Times is nothing really there, particularly just Johnson and ex-Cosmo editor and ice hockey owner taps Spack's craze for 4.7 Apex.
That's almost like a variety type.
Biz, bang, bang, whatever.
Yeah. Taps Spack's craze. I have no clue what the hell any of that is.
I have no idea. Yeah. Equally, Johnson set a plan that would allow betting shops and tracks to reopen doors.
Wow, well, that's definitely headline news, yeah.
What is the Racing Post? The Daily Star.
That's a slightly bit. That's not snotty. That's not bozo. I don't know what that's like. Makes up of the things there. Even I know it's.
That's naughty, but
I think Noddy's car registration was Noddy 1. I'd say they turned it into Knob 1.
The K is on. Haven't we suffered enough? Flares are back in fashion to go with the mullet.
Okay, that's
Well,
some of us in the 70s have a hope then. Yeah.
And Derek, your column today, no defense of the relationships.
Yeah, basically what I'm saying is there's been a lot of stories in the last, and some really good stories, particularly in the Examiner, particularly in the Irish Times, Conor Gallagher, and because Connor's my head at the moment, who's responsible for it in the Irish the Examiner. There have been really good stories about the breakdown relationship between the civil servants and senior military. Now, what I did is I said, right, fair enough, like, guys, I think we might be missing a point here, which is this isn't about personalities. This isn't about that one doesn't get along with that one. I think there's a far more fundamental problem here, and it's a political problem, which is the lack of political direction, the lack of political clout, the lack of political priorities accorded to defence over the last 10 years.
And to illustrate that, Derek,
yeah, what is it like that since 2011 we've had a defence minister was also Minister for Justice, and justice was their priority during their 3 years there. Yeah. A defence minister who was also Minister for Agriculture, 2 defence ministers who were also Taoiseach, and a defence minister who's now Minister for Foreign Affairs. That's the defence ministers for the last 11 years. From most of that period, you had one junior Minister for Defence who was de facto the Minister for Defence on a day-to-day basis. But a guy, I'm not having a go at him, I've written about it several times before.
You were critical. Paul
Keogh.
Keogh, I beg your pardon.
Yeah, but he's not a guy with political clout. He's not a guy with political heft. And that's the problem, which is the argument for defense. And by the way, it's a very difficult argument to be arguing for defense spending at a time when money is scarce.
Yeah.
But you're still, but as we see at the moment, which is we need our defence forces for a whole range of purposes, a lot of them for emergency provision here.
Yeah.
But also, if you're going to have an army, if you're going to have a defence forces, I believe it should be 10,500. According to the last white paper in 2015, it should be 9,500. In reality, it's 8,300.
They were the only public sector that lost jobs, and
it wasn't even lost jobs. They lost jobs, yeah. But no, what my argument was that between 2001 and 2010, during the loss of the Celtic Tiger, it was the only public service that actually reduced staff.
Yes, that's what I mean.
Now, we didn't spend less on it. We actually spent the same amount. What we did is we actually reduced the numbers, paid the people who were there better, equipped them better, trained them better, gave them better resources. It wasn't perfection. It wasn't that we sorted out every barracks. I remember going to Cahill Brewer Barracks on stage. I was horrified by the accommodation in which people were graded, particularly when they were doing training programs and the rest. So it wasn't as if this was some nirvana. But that was what I was saying. So at a time when the public sector was increasing by 17% between 2001 and 2010, the Defence Forces numbers, including the department, reduced by 8%. But we did more with that 8%. So I'm saying it's been a model of how public sector would work. So number one, so when the tightening of the belt came, the argument was, and I remember actually writing a piece for the then Taoiseach speech, Brian Cowan, saying, it's not that we're not saying defence should be let off the hook, but they've proven how public sector reform should work. If one of the things we're trying to achieve during the crisis is how do you get government to do more for less? Well, let's not punish the ones who've actually proven how you do it. By 2011, that's what was happening. And what's happened since then is they've paid a hefty price. And because there's been no political will, there's no political battle. How could the Minister for Agriculture go into the Minister for Finance and bang the table and say, I want the following for farmers, I want the following for investors, go out the door and come back in again and say, right, now I'm here as Minister of Defence and I want to argue exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
That money that I've just argued for my department, I now want to argue for this department.
Yeah.
You just have no credibility and it doesn't happen in reality. The Taoiseach is sitting there just being kind of primus inter pares, doesn't get terribly involved on a day-to-day basis. So I think what's happened is that the department has been basically just protecting itself and has basically been shielding itself. And the military are kind of saying, well, hang a second, that's grand. But we're the ones taking the hit. It's our people who are signing on. It's our people who are applying for welfare and applying for a supplementary welfare allowance because their pay has lost its impact. So I mean,
we had a guy living in a tent last year. There was a guy living in a tent, a soldier living in a tent.
Because what was happening was the fellows were travelling up and down. There was also reorganisation that meant that some fellows were duty. They went from a 3-brigade model to a 2-brigade model. That's a separate argument.
Right.
But it meant that guys sometimes had to report to their headquarters for duty, their headquarters went from being 30 or 40 miles away to being 70, 80, 90 miles away. So guys saying, hang a second, I'm travelling in my car. Sometimes
just crash
it's not worth me going home. I better go off, sleeping in the car, coming up and reporting back into duty the next morning. It became chaotic. And it became deeply unfair. at a time as well, we went from having 800 troops overseas, receiving kind of various pay and allowances in return from that. We went down to having 400 troops overseas. So that's 850 people per year, every year. Seeing a cut in their allowances, about 8, 10, 20 grand, depending on where they were on the scale. That's a hell of a hit in terms of people's incomes, etc. So there's a whole range of things that hit them in a perfect storm. Allowances were cut. And the department was constantly saying to the Department of Finance, we're the best boy in class. Look at that. We're going to hand you back 130 million over. That's, I think, and that's what it comes down to.
And because the soldiers
are furious because
they're
looking at the department. They're looking at the officials in the department who have handed back 130 million over 6 years to the Department of Finance. But the civil servants in the department have had their pay restoration. But Defence Forces haven't, because it's a separate model. And I think there's a whole range of things. So I think
and because they're soldiers, I guess they can't speak out really.
No, they can't. And there's a case was taken there a couple of years, 2 or 3 years ago, to the on representation, which is there are 2 representative organisations of Defence Forces: RACO for the commissioned officers and PT4 for the other ranks, or for the non-commissioned officers. And PT4 had asked several times to be part of ICTU, not because it wants to go out and strike and the rest of it, because it wants to have access to the services that a union can offer, and particularly services about how to do pay and conciliation, how to offer the services a union does, like any union would offer to its members, in terms of, if you have a dispute, well, we can offer you these advisory services, a whole range of things. And it would have been helped PD4 to have access to that. And the department has set its face against it. But there's a European, it's not a European judgment, but there was a European case taken to us who said, no, this is fair. It happens, that's like standard across Europe, but there's lots of examples of other military organizations who do have access to this, who do have professional representation, and do have access to these professional services, and found that Ireland was in breach. So there's a whole myriad of things. But the answer to all of this is political will, political management. And if you want to say, like, sometimes can departments run themselves? Yes, but you need a political direction to give it. And that's and I'm saying, rather than trying to portray this as a personality battle, this is a political battle, and there will be a political solution is needed to it.
Yeah, and I suppose the Greens aren't particularly crazy about defence either.
Strange enough, like, I was in government when we were in with the Greens, and there's certain things they used to get hot and heavy over. But having said that, I cannot remember anyone, political party, seriously opposing Irish participation in UN peacekeeping mission anywhere. Certainly the Greens never opposed it, and didn't do it. Now, they had problems with our membership of the European Defence Agency and other things like that, and they don't like the fact that we buy weapons. Yeah. Like, well, if we're going to put guys into harm's way, there's no point in sitting there with what do you call it, a prayer, kind of a what do you call it, an Indian fucking dream thing, and the rest of it, whatever you call it, is not going to help.
Catapult.
Yeah.
Okay, Derek.
How recycled it is, yeah.
Well, I think the army or the soldiers have a great advocate in you, Derek. You've been very, very vocal the last.
Oh no, what they have is they have 2 excellent organisations, RACO and PD4. They have really good. But what you also have now is something that you didn't have before, is you have a lot of guys over the last maybe 20 years, 30 years, because of reforms made. Because of reforms made 20, 30 years ago, you have a lot of guys leaving the Defence Forces with the extra skills and the rest. But rather than staying there for their whole careers, they move on when they're 30, 40, 50, 60, 50, 40, 50. And you now have a cadre of guys out there who are officers who've served their time, left as a captain or a commandant or rest of, but are now in the private sector. And they're now kind of informing this debate. So I think there's a much bigger kind of constituency that speaks up for the Defence Forces.
Sure.
And I think that's there. So I'm just kind of, to a certain degree, I'm playing to the gallery in the small amount of that. I have to say today, like, I was pleasantly surprised now, the number of messages I got on Facebook and Twitter from individuals saying, listen, spot on, this is the argument that needs to be made. So I was very, very pleasantly surprised, because there's a big constituency out there. I mean, look, there's only 8,300 in the Defence Forces, but there's a lot of people who've been through the Defence Forces, and Defence Force families are a big, big group there. Yeah. And political parties should be aware of that. And I think there was a time they were very aware of it, and I think that it's to their detriment by missing it.
Well, they should be now. Derek, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
No problem.
Your column is in today's on the site today, and hopefully we'll